Hi, members. Jennifer Marusak, Vice President of your Governmental Affairs Department at LSMS. Today we're fortunate to have with us Speaker of the House Pro Tem, Representative Walt from New Orleans. And Representative Leger, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I know you actually left a resolution and committee hearing to come up here and spend some time, so thank you again so much. Now, Representative Leger, I know last week the House spent an extraordinary amount of time debating the budget. You went through it item by item, section by section, but you were able to pass it off the House floor, and now it's gone over for hearings in Senate Finance Committee. Will you talk to us about two things concerning the budget? What do you feel is the House's biggest accomplishment as the budget stands now? And what are some of your biggest concerns that you still have with that budget?
Well, thanks. I'll enjoy the opportunity to be able to talk to you, and this technology is really interesting, so I think it's a great opportunity to be able to talk to you and your members. Interestingly, I just passed this resolution related to funding medical education, and we've asked the Board of Regents to look at formula funding for our professional and graduate medical schools across the state, so I'm excited about moving that forward. I know it's important to your members. The budget was difficult this year, just like it has been for the last 6 years. We came in with a shortfall not only in the current fiscal year as we try to finish out through July 1, but also with a structural shortfall that we had to kind of work through. A lot of that was what was offered to us by the governor's office, and their budget provided one-time funding solutions to try to fill gaps, and I don't necessarily have a fundamental problem with that, because the truth is, when you're in difficult times, you've got to figure out a way to get through it, and you've got to figure out a way to meet the basic needs like education and healthcare. Some of the solutions they had, however, gave a lot of heartburn to a lot of members. One of their solutions involved taking $50 million from the convention center in the city of New Orleans and running that through the Coastal Restoration Fund and then spreading it out through state government. They sought to use some capital outlay in HB2 to fill that gap for the convention center. It was kind of a complicated scenario, and the House just kind of said, no, we're not going to do that. And so the $50 million was put back into the bank account at the convention center for them to use for their purposes. The coastal swap is what we were calling it, was basically eliminated. And so there were additional cuts made to balance things out. And I think for many that was a major accomplishment. For me, it was kind of moving money around and addressing probably some difficult budgeting issues. I think at the end of the day, the best accomplishment is that we balanced it and that we sent it over to the Senate, because, as you know, they've got to put their hands all over it, manipulate it, figure out what makes sense for them before we can vote on a final bill. And so that it is an important part in the process that we sent it over. But we did a few things that I think were really positive. We have a waiver program in the greater New Orleans area that serves through basically FQHCs, and it's called the Greater New Orleans Hospital and Clinic Waiver. They refer to it as a NOKI waiver. It's got a few more words in there, but we were able to fund that. It had run out of funding. It was a waiver approved by Health and Human Services and CMS that provides for primary care for about 95,000 people in the greater New Orleans area. We were able to restore funding for that and also restore funding for FQHCs across the state, which Representative Moreno and I worked on, and she actually handled the amendment on the floor. I did an amendment in committee that restored some of that funding. I think that's a really positive thing. And then I handled an amendment on the floor to restore cuts to emergency rooms. Basically, DHH had, for triage purposes, DHH had made a cut that was essentially reimbursing our private providers about $50 for triage when people come to the emergency rooms. My hope is that we'll work with them through the process to try to institute that policy change in a more fair and even-handed way. It's difficult for me to understand how you can triage someone with a earache and someone with a heart attack for $50. I mean, those are different things, and I think we ought to recognize that as policymakers. So We did do a few, sort of small things throughout the budget that address some concerns, and now the budget's over in the Senate, and they're going to talk to Chairman Donahue yesterday in Finance, and they're all over it. And I expect to see it in the last day of session, and we'll probably be working towards getting a bill that we can concur in rather than send it to conference. But who knows?
Representative Leger, we've got a little more than 2 weeks left. I guess it's kind of 3 weeks officially on the calendar from yesterday before you adjourn for this 2014 session. Can you talk to me about some of the big issues that y'all still have to settle before adjournment?
So from a budgetary standpoint, revenue estimating will meet probably in the next week or so, and hopefully our collections have gone up. We've moved the sessions up a little bit in the last couple of years, which kind of puts us at a disadvantage when it comes to the collection of income tax and other revenues that come in, corporate and personal. And so hopefully collections will be up in the last month or so, and we'll have a little bit more flexibility with our budgeting process. There continues to be intense debate about a couple of different issues, and I think that'll all come to a head in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we're running short on time. The issue of Common Core and the park evaluation, which has been an education issue throughout the session, continues to be an issue. And while there are only a couple of instruments out there that address it, one of them is heading over to the Senate now. It's my bill, HB 953, which essentially implements high level of standards and a nationally competitive test, but it does it in a patient way that allows for an additional year of testing and data collection before we set a baseline achievement level for students. And so it gives teachers, students, administrators, school districts a little bit more time to give the test, get used to the test, and hopefully gives our Department of Education the opportunity to set a fair baseline achievement level that will allow us that'll allow our students to compete nationally with the best students out there. I think that our students are just as smart as anybody else. We just got to give them the right target to aim for and help them get there.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, you and I have spoken quite a bit about upgrading the technology for your House members. I believe during the last campaign cycle, some folks just started to kind of dabble into social media. I think during this next election cycle, they're really going to start taking full advantage of spreading the word, spreading their message, and getting voters to know who they are as candidates. And then I think when that goes over into the next legislative cycle, those constituents now are still going to want more of that social media and some of that continuous interaction. So what are some things that you've been thinking about to help upgrade the interaction between your House members and their constituents back home?
Yeah, I think the technology that we're using right now to do this is amazing. And I think that what technology continues to present for us are new opportunities to communicate better with our constituents. I use Twitter, I use Facebook, I use other social media tools to try to communicate with my constituents. And I started that many years ago when I first got here, when Twitter was kind of just coming along. And I've used it more and more over the years because constituents and people use it more and more over the years. Last year I used it more than I ever have. And I got a lot of really positive responses from constituents who were able to say I was able to follow the action so much more closely and more intimately. But that gets challenging when you're in the middle of debates, when you're in the middle of floor action, when you're in the middle of meetings, when you're all over the Capitol. It seems to me that it gets more and more difficult to kind of keep up with that stuff. So what I'd like to see the House do is figure out some ways to invest in some technology that'll help members do that. And I think we should have this sort of technology that you're using now available to allow members to film short segments to either post to their website, post to a YouTube video that can link to a website, or to social media that allows them to share messages about specific issues that are important to their constituents and important to them as the process goes on. I think it's relatively easy to accomplish, and we've talked to our information, our public information office about doing that. Obviously, we have limits on resources too, but I think it would be a positive investment. We've also, we've also talked about and are working on setting up a series of workshops that are designed to try to assist people in learning more about how to use social media and other tools that are available to communicate better with constituents. But the complicated thing is the more you do it, the more people expect. And that gets very difficult. We already get thousands of emails a day. We already get dozens of phone calls a day. And as legislators, we have one staff person in our office back home who functions as an aide, as a secretary, as a office manager, and does all of those things. And really, they don't get compensated fairly for all the things that they do. And so piling more and more on them, I think, is not a great thing. It's difficult to ask members to be really involved in social media and other things when they're already juggling bills and committee meetings and floor activities and the emails and the calls that we're already getting. So it is kind of adding more and more of a challenge to us. We do have great staff here in our public information office that works to assist members, but what that takes is members actually having the time to sort of engage with them and talk about the things that they want to work with them on. I think they're pretty much here to serve but you have to have that conversation and talk about what you want to do. Another thing that I've done and that I try to do more and more is an e-newsletter, an email blast that kind of updates weekly what's happening, and I've gotten a great response from constituents on that. And I want to make sure that all of our members at least have access to a template that can allow them to do that relatively easily. And so we're continuing to try to address these needs. I think that with Skype and other forms of communication, it gets to a point where you have a lot of great tools that are available to allow for better communication. Some of our districts don't have as many people with access to all of these technologies as others. And certainly people in certain parts of my district don't have access to computer every day or to Skype or necessarily to social media. But more and more you see that people are using their telephones as a device that accesses email, websites, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other things. So I think that it's just a matter of time before it becomes really ubiquitous in what we do. And I think to a certain extent, it already is a major part of what we do. I get so much of my news from Twitter. It's just an easy way to be able to scan through what's happening and see interesting articles about interesting things. And I think that'll happen more and more. And so we're going to try to be on the cutting edge. I think we have a really good website. When we go to national conferences, we get awards for our technology. It may not be the most advanced, but when we compare to other legislatures, it's pretty good. Allows the general public to track bills, and we want to keep improving that. And I think that in the next term we'll be moving more towards an iPad or other mobile device type technology as opposed to a big laptop that we're using now. I think it saves some money, and it's a little bit easier for members to be able to access all their instruments and other bills. And some of us are using iPads now as a way of trying to sort of pilot that.
Again, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, thank you so much for your time today. And if there's anything you'd like to say to our LSMS members, I know they'd love to hear it.
I just want to thank your members for their engagement in the process. They've engaged in so many difficult issues over the years, and I think we'll continue to have issues where we'll really count on them for leadership and guidance. I think the issue of medical marijuana will be back again next year, and certainly their position and their thoughts on it are very welcome and necessary, I think, to that debate. And so I thank you for always being available to provide information when we need it, and the position of your members. And just great to be able to talk to you and to them just briefly to express my gratitude, but also to share with this great technology that you offer. I think it's unique to the building now, and my guess is that it will catch on quickly among other organizations because it's a really great tool. So thank you.